It has survived millions of years of evolution. A mindless eating machine. It will attack and devour anything. It is as if God created the devil and gave him jaws. From the best-selling novel, Jaws, rated PG, may be too intense for younger children.
Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1975 smorgasbord of different genres, suspense, horror, and adventure that is Jaws. Now, Jaws is one of those films that is widely considered by many to be one of the greatest films of its genre, if not one of the best films of all time. And I gotta be honest, I agree with all of those claims. This is one of my favorite movies and one of my favorite Spielberg films. It honestly might be my favorite movie that Steven Spielberg has directed. I love it that much. And what's really interesting about Jaws is that it's one of those films that grew on me. Because when I was younger, I wasn't as big of a fan of Jaws. In fact, I watched Jaws 3D more than the first movie. But as I got older, I started to appreciate the film more and its storytelling and the performances and the writing. And the more times that I saw the movie, the more I became enamored with it. And now I am a absolutely enormous fan of this film. I think this movie is a absolute masterpiece, and it is definitely deserving of its status as one of cinema's greatest achievements. And it's one of those movies where lightning definitely did strike here. They captured lightning in a bottle. Or you might argue they captured a shooting star, because they literally did capture a shooting star on film in this movie. You know how rare that is? To capture a shooting star on film without expecting it, without looking out for it, or shooting footage of the night sky on a consistent basis. On a freak chance of luck, they shot a scene that had a real shooting star in it. I mean, that is just amazing to me, and it proves how special this film is. The movie is directed by Steven Spielberg, and prior to this, he did the TV movie Duel, and that got him a lot of acclaim. And he did a few other things, like the Sugarland Express. But it wasn't really like Steven Spielberg was on the same level that he would be after this film, in terms of respect from his peers, and in terms of respect and admiration from other studios. So he was still hungry. He was still a very hungry filmmaker. And the rights for Peter Benchley's novel, Jaws, were bought up, I believe, by Universal or by the producers, Richard D. Zanuck and David Brown. And Spielberg was, I believe, one of their first choices. I think because I really liked his work in Duel. And initially Spielberg was reluctant, but he agreed to do it if he had more creative control. Which, when you think about it, it's a little ballsy. Not a little, it's very ballsy. For a guy who just did a TV movie and the Sugarland Express and really wasn't this big, huge name director yet. Like, Jaws is the film that put him on the map. And he's swinging his weight around already. It's like, wait a second, Steven. Like, are you really in the position to be doing that? But he managed to get creative control and beat the odds in that instance, and the film was so much better for it because he had a great vision for this movie. He realized the flaws of the novel, which, to be honest, there were many. He realized that there were too many subplots that weren't necessary, like the mafia subplot and others, and he decided they needed to be trimmed out. He's the one that brought on board, I believe, Carl Gottlieb to do a rewrite and to do a version of the script. He also realized that the characters in the novel were unlikable, and he saw that that's not going to work with this movie. The characters need to be likable. They can be surly, like Quint, but they can't be so mean and nasty to the point where you don't give a shit about them. You don't care about their fate. So he realized that, and he took that into account. And he made sure that these characters were strong and they were likable and they felt fleshed out. And on top of that, he's the one that's responsible for the structure of the plot, because it was his idea. He wanted the film to be more of a slow burn suspense mystery in the beginning, establishing the characters, establishing the setting, showcasing the power of the shark by showing the aftermath of the shark attacks, or a shark attack here or there, but really not showing too much. And then the last half of the film was an adventure. It was all about the hunt for the shark. That's due to Steven's mind and his brilliance as a creator, and his imagination. Like, that all came from his mind, and he was like, that's how I think this film is going to work. And he was 100% correct with that assessment. And that's another really risky thing when it comes to combining these two different stories into one that have honestly pretty different tones. The second half of the film, which features Brody, Quint, and Hooper on the high seas hunting after the shark, is something that has a lighthearted tone in a lot of instances, but also has a really serious tone, like during some of the monologues, and then during the scenes where the shark is attacking. But there are other moments where it does. It has this very adventure movie vibe to it. And that's intentional, and it works quite well, despite how vastly different the tone is compared to the majority of the film, and when you think about it. Normally, this kind of tonal whiplash would be something that would be detrimental, but that's not the case with Jaws. Instead, it's a strength because Spielberg is so good at handling these different tones and making it so one doesn't feel like it's dominating over the other. So he was very instrumental in the writing, the creative process of the film, and to why it's successful on that front. But he was also equally successful when it comes to the visuals. You could tell that he was a incredibly talented filmmaker at this time, and his hunger to show everyone that he's that good definitely is something that makes this such a special film for Spielberg. Because I'm not saying that later on in his career he didn't do amazing work after this, but there's something to be said about that hunger, about that drive to prove to everyone that sees your film that you are a unique talent. And that's something that really isn't the same as soon as a director makes it and makes it big. They still have the passion for filmmaking because they love making movies, but it's not the same drive. And there's no reason why it would be the same drive, because that's a one-time thing. And Spielberg took a lot of risks with the way he shot the film. He shot the film on purpose at water level to make it feel like the audience is treading water, which is really cool and different. And he handled so many different aspects of this film's production so well. He's the one that improvised on the fly to make up for the fact that the shark wasn't working most of the time. The shark was infamously known as I think that one time they called it the Titanic, and they've called it a bunch of different things, but one name that really makes me crack up is the Great White Turd. Yeah, Spielberg was so frustrated with this fucking shark not working that he called it the Great White Turd. And so he had to deal with that. The shark barely worked. And so he had to think on the fly, okay, what am I going to do? The shark doesn't work. The initial plan was to have a lot of scenes of the shark. I got to change my plan. I got to change directions. And I think it was fate that the shark didn't work, because that's one of the main reasons why the film is as suspenseful as it is because of the fact you don't see a lot of the shark. You see people getting attacked, getting dragged around in the water, like the impressive opening sequence where Chrissy gets killed by the shark, which is one of the most chilling opening scenes in cinema, if you ask me. And it's so effective when it comes to grabbing you by the jugular and just shocking you without showing any blood or gore. What really leaves the most impact is her screams of bloody murder as she's just being dragged around and she's helpless. She's holding on to the buoy and is praying to God to save her. And the shark's like, nope, and drags her under while she's still screaming her lungs out. Like, that's a really powerful opening sequence. And you don't see the shark. And then later on, like, you'd see a fin, or you'd see a little bit of a shark attack and some blood in the water, but you didn't really see a full shot of the shark until over an hour into the movie. And you would think, like, normally that kind of thing would be a mistake, or it would be something that would hold a film back. But that's not the case here. It actually helps the movie because it creates a very effective build of tension and an equally as strong release once you have the chum scene, which is another scene that is just very memorable and iconic for the reason that the reactions from the actors are real. Because this was a take where I believe Roy Scheider was just expecting the shark wasn't going to work because it hadn't worked for multiple takes, and he was just kind of going through the motions. And I was like, all right, I'm doing the chum scene again, and then the shark worked, and it scared the shit out of him. And that reaction that Brody has, that Roy Scheider has in that moment, was real and genuine. And there's a lot of that in the film, these real and genuine emotions and reactions from the cast. And Spielberg's a big reason for that because he cultivated a lot of those. And he was able to do that by controlling such a chaotic production. The movie looked like everything was smooth and everything worked swimmingly, and that's not the case at all. Yet the shark didn't work most of the time, and even when it did, it was still having issues because they were shooting at Martha's Vineyard, and the salt water was corroding the insides of the mechanical shark, and it was also completely deteriorating the outside with the latex and the rubber. That's why there are scenes later on in the movie where the shark is attacking the orca where you can see pieces of the shark falling off because of the fact that the salt water was just destroying the thing. So the shark didn't work most of the time. There was even one time where I think one shark model actually sunk to the bottom of the fucking ocean, or wherever they were shooting at. And if that isn't bad enough, he also had to deal with a difficult cast. And mainly the difficulties were primarily due to Robert Shaw being an alcoholic and being drunk off his fucking ass for so much of the film. And this led to a lot of conflict with so many different people, mainly between Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss, who were at each other's throats throughout the production. I mean, to the point where Richard Dreyfuss was fed up with the guy, and you can't blame him. And Spielberg captured that spontaneity, that real life angst and anger towards Robert Shaw in so many scenes in this film. When you see moments where Richard Dreyfuss is annoyed with Quint, that's real stuff. That's not acting by Richard Dreyfuss when he's telling him to fuck off, when he's making faces and he's just fucking laughing like a maniac because he's sick and tired of his shit. That's real. That's real acting. And in a lot of ways, Dreyfuss acted as a vessel for Spielberg's own frustrations with Shaw. So there's just so many different factors that were not working out. And it's amazing that this film turned out as well as it did when you consider how difficult the production was, how many hoops that Spielberg had to jump through, and also when it comes to the fact that he's still a pretty young filmmaker who's still trying to build their confidence and still trying to showcase their talents to the rest of the world. So Spielberg was just born for this. He was made for this. And it shows, because any other director who doesn't have the same fortitude would have crumbled under the amount of pressure, under the amount of issues that Spielberg had to handle throughout the production of this movie. That's what I'm saying when it feels like it's a shooting star that they captured in a bottle, because of the fact that there were so many things that could have gone wrong, and then everything still turned out great in the end. So yeah, Spielberg's direction, just terrific, tremendous work on so many different levels, from the quirkiness of the town's people to the real horror of the shark attacks, to the sense of epic adventure during the second half of the film, where the crew of the Orca is hunting after the shark. The suspense that was very Hitchcockian with the barrels and with all of that. And the fact that he was just so instrumental when it comes to the story and the structure. And he was also a big part as to why Roy Scheider was cast as Brody, because Spielberg was talking about the movie while he was at a dinner, and Scheider was apparently also eating at the same place, and he overheard the conversation that Spielberg was having about Jaws, and Roy immediately was curious about it. He wanted to know more about it once he heard about a shark that jumps onto the deck of a boat. He was like, wow, that sounds crazy. And through that meeting, Roy Scheider eventually, I believe, got his foot in the door and got the part, and the rest is history. I know initially the studio, and I think even Spielberg, wanted Charlton Heston, but Spielberg decided to not go with Charlton Heston. See, he's another reason why Roy Scheider was brought on board, not just because of his conversation, but because of that, because of the decision to go in a different direction when it comes to casting. Because he felt that Charlton Heston, as talented of an actor as he was not a guy who was going to work with what he was going to attempt to do with the film, because he felt that he brought a presence that didn't fit with Brody. And Heston resented Spielberg for years because of that. But it was a decision that ultimately was the right one, because Roy Scheider was just absolutely phenomenal in this role. And it was the role that arguably is the most memorable when it comes to his entire career. And it put him on the map. And there were other people that were intended or were asked to be other roles in the film. For instance, Spielberg initially wanted Jon Voight for Hooper, but Jon Voight decided not to do that. So they looked at Timothy Bottoms, Jan Michael Vincent, Kevin Kline, Joel Grey, Jeff Bridges. But it was Spielberg's friend at the time, George Lucas, that recommended Richard Dreyfuss. And Richard Dreyfuss initially was like, I don't want to do it. But then he did a film that didn't do very well, The Apprenticeship of Lenny Kravitz. And he was not very happy with his performance in the movie, so he was worried he would never get to work again, so he agreed to be in Jaws. And be the guy who has to deal with the wrath of Robert Shaw throughout the production. But all of that turmoil and all of that stress was worth it, because he delivered a dynamic and strong performance that would ensure that his career would not end with Lenny Kravitz. It's actually Duddy Kravitz, because Lenny Kravitz is a singer. But can't blame me. So it's Duddy Kravitz, which was a dud. Lenny Kravitz. But yeah, just a great cast too. I mean, a pitch perfect, just another instance of capturing a shooting star with the stars of the film. Roy Scheider is Brody. His strength and his vulnerability when it comes to this role was unparalleled. Just really great stuff. Robert Shaw, arguably probably his most memorable performance as Quint. The guy was a bastard on the set, but when he was on the money, when he was sober, he was the perfect guy to play that role, to bring that character to life. The speech when he's talking about his time on the USS Indianapolis is honestly one of the best monologues that I've ever seen and I've ever heard on film. And the first take was a disaster because he was sloshed out of his mind. But he felt so bad after that day and after that take that he got sober and he did that really impressive speech all in one take the next day. So he was still someone who cared enough about his craft that he was humble enough to ask for forgiveness, but at the same time to do what it takes to make up for his mistakes. And in a way, the dynamic between him and Richard Dreyfuss, which was so explosive because the two didn't get along in real life, was a benefit, was a boost to the movie, because you had this great chemistry between the two, where they are butting heads constantly. And it came across so real, because it was real. Like, and you also got to look at it this way. The last half of the film is 3 stars. Your 3 main stars on a boat in the middle of the fucking ocean. And they have to deal with the elements as well as other outside factors. That's another instance of a shooting star being captured in a bottle. Because that'll never happen today. You will never see a film today where you will have 3 actors in the middle of the fucking ocean. Not happening. Because of the fact that there's too many liabilities at stake. And especially you won't have a cast that includes a disgruntled actor in Robert Shaw who's showing up drunk off his ass for the majority of the production. That would also be considered a liability. And understandably so. Richard Dreyfuss as Matt Hooper, just really great stuff here. I love his performance. I love his character. I love how exasperated he is. I love how he's always high-strung, and it seems like he's always on edge. And I love how he's not afraid to speak his mind, like that moment with the mayor, where you're going to ignore this problem until this problem swims up and bites you on the ass. Like, he represents the audience as well, because the audience is sick of the mayor's shit. The audience is like, what the hell are you doing? This is going to be a disaster. Listen to Brody. Close the fucking beach, you dumbass. Then you have Lorraine Gary as Ellen Brody. She's the rock of the film, the heart of the movie. I thought, despite it being a clear instance of nepotism because she was the wife of one of the producers, it's one of those rare instances of nepotistic casting that actually works. And I thought the chemistry between her and Roy Scheider was sweet and was charming. Murray Hamilton as the mayor, one of the best clueless asshole mayors in cinema. Like, this guy just thought of nothing other than the money and the reputation of his 4th of July celebration. The beaches will be open. We will have the celebration no matter what. I don't care if the shark that they caught isn't the one. I'm going to assume that it is, even though it's not the case, because I'm clueless. Great casting. And he just did a wonderful job playing this mayor who just always had his head up his own ass. I also want to mention Lee Fierro as Miss Kittner. You really felt for that character so much. But at the same time, she was a little out of line with her assuming that her son's death was all the fault of Brody. She wasn't aware of everything that he tried to do to prevent that from happening. But that's what grief does. Grief makes you react in extreme ways. And I feel that that actress did a remarkable job capturing genuine grief when it comes to the loss of her child. And I just like a lot of the townspeople, a lot of the different quirks, a lot of the variety of folks that you saw who lived in Amity. Even some of the outsiders that came to Amity to try to hunt the shark. There's one performance that always stands out to me and cracks me up, where Richard Dreyfuss's character Hooper is explaining what kind of shark they caught. I was like, it's a tiger shark. And then you have this one guy who's like, a what? That always cracks me up, man. So I wanted to give that guy a lot of credit for livening up the moment when it comes to a film that has a lot of really serious stuff in it. Some really heavy subject matter, like kids getting eaten by sharks and so on. And you can't talk about Jaws without mentioning the score by John Williams, which initially Spielberg didn't really get. He thought it was not really that good. He wasn't impressed with it. He was like, that's it? You sure this isn't a demo or something? But he trusted John Williams, and his trust paid off because the score, I believe it won an Oscar, and it's still considered to be one of the most iconic, memorable scores in cinema due to how simple but effective it is. The main theme, I mean, anybody that you run into on the street is going to recognize that theme. Dun 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 dun. And I think the score is not only iconic due to that bit, it's also iconic due to other parts. Like, I love the adventure score that John Williams created for the last half of the film, where the crew of the Orca is sailing on the open seas. I love that score. It's a really fun, rollicking score. And the film is just gorgeously shot by Bill Butler, the cinematographer. There are so many shots in this that are just absolutely beautiful. The way that he captured the shooting star at dusk, the opening sequence, a lot of the other scenes of the beaches and of Amity Island, and the stuff during the climax. Just a lot of really gorgeous looking cinematography. Shots that are so beautiful that you could take a photo and frame it, and it would be a work of art. And then the editing by Verna Fields, which I believe was something that won an Oscar. Excellent editing. Like, this movie has some really tight and taut moments of suspense, and the editing is such a key part of why those scenes work as well as they do when it comes to building tension and thrilling the audience. And speaking of thrills, I mean, this is one of the best examples I can think of when it comes to a movie that is admittedly a slow burn, but delivers the thrills. Because it starts off slow, but there's a lot going on. There's enough to keep you intrigued, and there's enough jolts here and there to keep you awake. And then by the end of it, it's a thrill ride. It's a thrilling adventure with a really awesome climax. Smile, you son of a... And it blows up the fucking shark. Like, that is just so awesome and so badass. Is it realistic? No. In a lot of ways, this film is a massive fantasy when it comes to a killer shark movie. But that's a big part of its appeal. That this shark is such a badass that it can go underwater with not one, not two, but 3 barrels. It could barrel through the side of a ship and still keep coming. And it's just a relentless man-eater, and such a hard shark to put down that you could pump it full of lead and it's still coming, and in order to take its ass out, you gotta blow it sky high. Just love that about the film. I love that it's this relentless force of nature that takes so much to finally stop. And it's one of those rare films that's 2 hours, but it never really feels like it's lagging. It never really feels like it's having too many moments where it's shuffling its feet or it's drowning. So, yeah, I can't say enough about how great and how amazing and how awesome Jaws is. It's a true classic in every sense of the word. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Jaws. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.